A reading from the book of Job. Job opened his mouth and cursed his day. Job spoke out and said, "Perish the day on which I was born, the night when they said, 'The child is a boy.' Why did I not perish at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Or why was I not buried away like an untimely birth, like babes that had never seen the light? Wherefore did the knees receive me? Or why did I soak at the breast? For then I should have laid down and been tranquil. Had I slept, I should then have been at rest, with kings and counselors of the earth, who built where now there are ruins, or with princes who had gold and filled their houses with silver. There the wicked cease from troubling. There the weary are at rest. Why is light given to the toilers, and life to the bitter in spirit? They wait for death, and it comes not. They search for it rather than for hidden treasures. Rejoice in it exultantly, and are glad when they reach the grave. Those whose path is hidden from them, and whom God has hidden it. Verbum Domini. Let my prayer come before you, O Lord. O Lord my God, by day I cry out, by night I clamor in your presence. Let my prayer come before you. Incline my ear to my call for help. My soul is filled with troubles. My life draws near to the netherworld. I am numbered with those who go down into the pit. I am a man without strength. My couch is among the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no longer, and who are cut off from your care. You have plunged me into the bottom of the pit, into the dark abyss. Upon me your wrath lie heavy, and with all your billows you overwhelm me.
The Son of Man came to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Lucam.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
When the days for Jesus to be taken up were fulfilled, he resolutely determined to journey to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him. On the way, they entered a Samaritan village to prepare for his reception there, but they would not receive him, because the destination of his journey was Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" Jesus turned and rebuked them, and they journeyed to another village. Verbum Domini.
Laus tibi Christe.
I want to, first of all, make mention that I'm offering this Mass for Father Thomas Dubé. He passed away yesterday. May God grant him eternal rest. Many of us know Father Dubé well because of the many, many series that he's done here at the network and the many programs he's been on. He's served God very, very well, and we pray for the repose of his soul. In terms of today's readings, Job cursed his day. Why? We heard yesterday that everything that he had was taken from him. All that he loved and all that he worked for, not only his property, but also his children, all died on the same day as his property is taken away. And this is a horrendous loss. And then he's tempted further in the second chapter. We didn't hear chapter 2, but it continues on where then he himself is afflicted with these sores. And he has to use broken pieces of pottery to scrape away the inside of the sores. And his wife simply continues the temptation. And she, as he says, speaks like a foolish woman by saying, just curse God and die. And he won't do it. So he avoids cursing God for either the loss of everything that he has, and in fact, for that, he blessed God and gave the famous line, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord. So he blesses God. And he refuses to curse God when he himself is afflicted after all this. And all of this is done at the instigation of the evil one. God gives permission for the evil one to afflict Job, even though Job has done nothing wrong. And this brings out the key issue of the book of Job, that in the book of Job, the question is one of having the righteous person suffer. Now, the wicked people suffering, we can understand. As a matter of fact, every so often, we even enjoy it. We like it when somebody bad gets their comeuppance. And that's something that's on one side. But when a good person suffers so much, then we say, why? Is the universe unjust? And certainly, in this case, Satan is unjust in what he does. He's tempting Job to see that he can make Job give way to cursing God, which was a capital crime. If you cursed God, that was a crime deserving of death. And so this would be the goal that the evil one has. And the word Satan, by the way, is used in the text. In Hebrew, Shatan means the one who tries to tempt, or the one who puts you on trial, the one who accuses you. So that the accusation that he wants to bring is not working. And even now, with this poem, in chapter 3 of Job, it's still not working. Because Job comes to the edge of cursing God, but he won't do it. He curses the day he was born. Now, there's no commandment against that. But and in cursing that day that he's born, he wishes that he were not, because he can see no meaning in what's going on. He sees no purpose. He's not aware that Satan is testing him. He's not aware that he's being attempted to be accused by the evil one. And so he curses the day that he was born and goes through it with a wish that he had died as either a miscarriage or had been neglected and just left to die. That would be better, because his life has gotten so miserable. Now, this is after his life had been so good. But one of the things that you see in this, and this is true of a lot of people, there are a lot of people who really go through this kind of temptation. They wish they hadn't been born. They wish they were dead. And they don't really wish they were dead. What they wish is they weren't going through the problems they have. They have a better idea what they don't want. They don't want the misery. They don't want the suffering. And so just get me out of that. It's not that they want death. And they want the place of the dead. Remember, for Job, the best that they can think of is Sheol. Sheol was not heaven, and it wasn't hell. It was a place of waiting. Your soul was there in a relatively unhappy existence. It's described as a place of mud, a place of darkness. But at least I won't be going through this problem. And that's why he focuses on, in Sheol, everybody's the same. The kings and the workers are all the same. You can be rich in this life, but in Sheol, you're on the same level as the guy who was the working guy. And everybody is there and waiting for they don't know what. They did not have any idea of looking forward to a heaven. So that's what he wants. Now, this poem is going to start a conversation. His friends had arrived right before this. And they did well, in fact. They did very well. They simply were quiet. They mourned with him the loss of his health, of his children, and of his property. And that was a good thing to do. The problem will start that in response to this poem, which Job gives to curse his day, they will begin to say, well, Job, you deserve this. You must have done something wrong. Confess your sin to God. And then all of this will be corrected. That's going to be their whole message. And he's going to keep on telling the truth. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't sin. They don't have any rap on me. And they can't get me for anything. But I'm still suffering. And the friends will become increasingly frustrated. They will continue to defend themselves and say, you did something wrong. It must be really bad. You're trying to hide it. You're just you're just worse than anybody we thought. You're not the Job we thought you were. And he's going to keep on insisting more vociferously, I didn't do anything wrong. Until we find out at the end of the book that he was right and they were wrong. But until then, the misery continues to have to defend himself in the face of all these things going wrong. Will just add to his misery. And that's why the friends are not doing what's right. And we have to pay attention to this. All of us not only know people who may have gone through horrendous difficulties, but one of the last things that we should do is say, well, it's because you did something wrong. You're going through this because you deserve it. And it's a way to try to explain it for them. And instead, the task would be to grieve with the person. As St. Paul will say later on in his epistles, rejoice with those who rejoice, but grieve with those who grieve. And enter into that suffering with them. That's the proper response, rather than trying to help them figure it out, as if we know better than they do, or as if we know what God has in mind, or if we understand what Satan might be up to. This is something that is not wise, and that's the point of this wisdom book. Job is one of the books of wisdom of the Old Testament. And it's not for us to figure out, why something happened. Because oftentimes the pain and misery is beyond our human ability to understand, except maybe sometimes in retrospect. Sometimes, after it's all over, you can look back and see, I really did learn something here. Something really did come out of this. Something I didn't expect, nor did I understand. But still something that ended up being better for me than I thought. And Job will be able to look back on it. That's why the book is written. To be able to look back and see that something good could come out of this. Now, in terms of today's gospel, there is already here a beginning of the sufferings of Christ. First, note that this begins a whole long section for 9 chapters. This will go on, where Christ sets his face toward Jerusalem, and that he's going to be making his journey toward Jerusalem. As it says here, he resolutely determined to journey to Jerusalem because it was the days when Jesus was to be taken up. The word taken up, analepsis, has a sense. It's used in a number of ancient books to mean death. But it doesn't just mean death by itself. When it's used by Philo and others, or in the book called The Ascension of Moses, it's used to give a sense of a death that leads to some other level of glory. And that this is something that is looking forward to Christ being taken up into heaven at the ascension. If anything is in mind, it's the final journey of Christ from earth to the ascension. So the journey up to Jerusalem is a journey toward the ascension of Christ, after which point he'll be seated at the right hand of the Father to intercede for us. But Christ knows and will tell the disciples that journey will also include death, that's not going to be separate. So he makes his journey and he sends messengers ahead of him. Now, by sending messengers ahead of him, he's thinking back to Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, where the messenger is sent ahead of the Messiah, and that messenger would be Elijah. So he's got this in mind. And they go to one of the first villages, the Samaritans. Why the Samaritans? Because this was on the journey from Galilee to Jerusalem, so it's just to the south. And as they go to the Samaritan village, they're rejected. And the reason that they're rejected is because he's making his journey to Jerusalem. They have no understanding of why this journey is being taken and how it's a journey that is not just for Christ, but it's a journey that's for the sake of all of us. And they have no comprehension. So they refuse to welcome him because he's on his way to Jerusalem. And the reaction of the disciples is to be like Elijah. If you remember, back in 1 Kings chapter 1, some messengers came from the king of Israel to Elijah. And the messengers were trying to arrest Elijah. And so he called down fire, and 50 of them were consumed. Another group came, called down fire, 50 of them were consumed. Third group comes with a lot more humility. And they said, if you wouldn't mind, would you like to go for a walk? We'll go visit the king, but we'll be good. We'll be good. It was much more humble approach, and then they're okay. But he lets them know who's boss. Well, that's what James and John want to do. If they're sent ahead of Jesus like Elijah, and they're rejected like Elijah, let's get some good fire and brimstone down here. We'll show them. And this not only indicates that they see themselves as being like Elijah, but also the tension with the Jews and the Samaritans. And as a matter of fact, about 13 years later, there were some Jewish pilgrims on their way from Galilee down to Jerusalem, and the Samaritans attacked and killed some of them. And it started a mini war between the Galileans and the Samaritans. So this tension was very deep-seated. You can read that in Josephus. And so Jesus responds to them in another way. Again, not unlike the friends of Job who see punishment as the way to go. With James and John, Jesus gives a different approach. Jesus, our Lord, will say to them that they're wrong. He rebukes them for wanting to bring down the fire, because he is already aware that he's on his way to Jerusalem for the sake of the Samaritans as well as for the Jews and the Gentiles. In fact, he's going to use one parable in which a Samaritan is the hero, and then he's going to cure a group of lepers, and only the Samaritan comes back to thank him. And in Acts of the Apostles are going to go to the Samaritans because Jesus ordered them at the ascension, to which he is headed right now. At the ascension, he said, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and even to the ends of the earth." He includes these Samaritans as the object for whom he died. He was willing to lay down his life for them. So the approach that he's going to take is not to call down fire and brimstone. Neither will that be the approach that he takes when people try to execute him and do execute him. He'll say to Pilate, "Don't you think I could call 12 legions of angels?" But he won't do that. He's not going to use revenge. He's not going to try to get back. He's rather going to try to redeem. And that for him, suffering is not going to be empty. Suffering is not going to be something that is a punishment, but suffering is going to be the means of redemption. And so he's going to embrace it. And this whole episode of setting his face toward Jerusalem is about his embracing of suffering. In this, we see ultimately the answer to Job, where Job could only see that his day should be cursed. And he doesn't know how to find a redemptive quality in suffering. Christ, whose own body will also be afflicted, not by sores, but by scourges, not by infection, but by nails and a cross. Christ is embracing that as the means for salvation. And in this, we can see something even beyond mere sympathy with those who suffer. We can see that there is a certain level at which we embrace the difficulties and the sufferings. Not that we enjoy them. It doesn't say that we enjoy them. But we embrace them as Christ did. And in this, we can do as St. Paul teaches, that we are able to embrace suffering for the sake of the church. In Colossians 1:24 and 25, St. Paul embraces sufferings and sees that this is making up for what is still lacking in the sufferings of Christ for the sake of his body, the church. And that our sense of being able to embrace the difficulties rather than give up is going to be a very clear approach that Christ wants to teach us in this text and throughout the whole of the gospel.